Deflation is here. What, Josh? Chapter 4 of my new book, Relax and Retire. Go ahead and get it, my friends. $9.99 paperback, $4.99 Kindle, something like that. If you want a signed copy, $20. Yeah, I sell my signature for money. Yes, I do. I'll give you a signed copy for it. And I only have about 20 of these left, and it's going to be a collector's item because, as you can see, Karen pointed out that we've duplicated the conclusion right there. So we duplicated a little bit of the title page, not the title page, the table of contents page. I didn't catch that before. It's still weird because I don't remember seeing that. I think Amazon printed it off incorrectly, but be that as it may, it's still a great book. Very proud of it. Love it. This might be one of my favorite chapters actually right here. So let's dive into this. In the table below, you'll see the growth in personal consumption expenditures, PCE, has dropped every single decade over the last 50 years. So here's PCE. The growth in PCE from 1959 to 69 was 4.4, the annual growth. Average annual percent change, 3.5 to 3.3 to 3.3 to 2.4. All right, so 4.4 in the 1960s, 3.5 was the annual growth in PCE in the 1970s. It stayed 3.3 from 1980 to the rest of the century. And then it went to 2.4 from the aughts. I don't know what it is now, but now check this out. Why has PCE growth slowed? One reason, quote, the slower growth was accounted for by slower growth in disposable personal income and by an increase in the personal savings rate. Wait, what? People are saving more? That seems to conflict with the perpetual retirement crisis I keep reading about, which I wrote about in my book, You Can Retire on Social Security. I wrote about the perpetual savings crisis that never quite seems to mature because when you look at retirees, the vast majority of those people are doing pretty good, actually. Right here, Chapter 11, even more reasons to be optimistic about retirement. Chapter 13, what savings crisis? So get that book too. Let me let Pablo out. Side note, I'm working on my next book, which will be part of I'm working on a course, investing for regular people, investing basics for regular people, I think is what I'll call it. And I have a book with that as well. It won't go with the course. You have to buy the book separately. If you buy the course, I'll probably give you the book at 50% off or something like that. But so I got another book coming out. So we got all these books. Relax and Retire. You Can Retire on Social Security. Retire with the Wellington Fund. You know, I've taken a stance on the Wellington Fund. It's still a good book. It still gives you a lot of good information here. Strategic Money Planning and the Tax Bomb in your retirement accounts. And, of course, my first piece of fiction, which I don't have here, is Return to Peaks Island. All right, so let's keep going here. You should buy them all. Hey, buy them for your friends and neighbors, too. Buy them. Even accounting for the slowing growth of disposable income, the reason the PCE is slowing is because our spending is different now than it was the decades ago. Notice in the chart from 1959 to 2009, the percent spent on goods. Here's goods. All right, goods. The increase in spending on goods has dropped from 4.2% to 2.7%. Isn't that interesting? Okay. All right, so it's dropped by 22%. The percent spending on goods has dropped by 22%. Pablo, would you make up your mind? All right, so here's the percent personal consumption expenditures. Goods, change in share, down by 22%. The percent spending on goods went from 54.3% of current dollar PCE. So of $100 you spend on personal consumption goods, personal consumption expenditures, 54% of that was spent on goods in 1959. In 2009, it was down to 32%, a drop in 22%. Watch this. Services went from, right here, 45% to 67%, an increase of 22%. Goods went down 22, services went up 22 in terms of the overall personal consumption expenditure. So let's keep going. Notice the chart below, the percent spent on goods has dropped by 22%, whereas over the same time, the spending on services increased by 22%. Coincidence? I don't think so. What this means is we've replaced spending our money on things we need for things we want. Quote, a large increase in the share of PCE accounted for by services, particularly by healthcare and financial services and insurance. A large decrease in the PCE accounted for by goods, particularly by food and clothing and footwear. All right. So if you can see right here, Here's durable goods. Went down by 3.9%. Non-durable goods, food and beverages, clothing and footwear, gasoline and other things. Clothing and footwear went down by double digits. Isn't that crazy? Food we need. Clothing, you kind of need it. You know, you don't have the same shoes for friggin' 20 years. You know what I'm saying? On the other hand, watch this. Household consumption expenditures went up right here. It went up by 21%. 11.6% was attributed to healthcare. 4.2% was attributed to financial services and insurance. Crazy. So let's keep going. Now you might look at the table above and say, but Josh, look how much healthcare has increased. Like we talked about, went up by 11.6%. We used to spend 3.9% of our PCE on healthcare, and now it's at 18.8. Isn't that crazy? Oh, right here. We used to spend on healthcare right there, 4.7. Now it's at 16.2, excuse me. Isn't that crazy? A huge increase. Spending on healthcare has gone up dramatically, almost quadrupling as a percentage of our expenditures. But the average consumer didn't pay for the bulk of this increase. Quote, a significant decrease in the share of PCE accounted for by out-of-pocket expenditures. A significant decrease in the share of PCE accounted for by out-of-pocket expenditures. In 1959, 72.7% of all personal consumption expenditures for healthcare was paid by out-of-pocket expenditures. By 2019, that share had been declined to 17.6%. So while healthcare as a whole went up from freaking 4.7 to 16.2, the out-of-pocket cost went down from 72% of PCE was paid for by healthcare out-of-pocket to 17.6. Isn't that crazy? During this period, the share of PCE for healthcare paid for by government increased from 3.4 to 45%. The most important changes in government funding of personal consumption expenditures resulted from Medicare and Medicaid programs in 1965. Even Jonathan Clements, who I frequently criticize, recognized this trend in his book Money Guide. Quote, over the past 50 years, we've seen two key changes in the way America spends. First, we're devoting less of our income to life's basics. Food, clothing, footwear, beverages account for just 11% of spending in 2009, down from 27% in 1959. Secondly, spending on healthcare, financial services, and insurance soared. For instance, healthcare rose from 5.9% of total spending to astonishing 19.7% in 2009. Much of this cost wasn't paid directly by the consumers, but rather by private insurance, Medicare and Medicaid, emphasis mine. So the cost of healthcare as personal consumption expenditures went through the roof, quadrupling. You did not pay for the bulk of that cost. Your insurance companies did. Now, your insurance, you have to pay month-to-month insurance costs. That went up for sure. But still, because the insurance kicked in, it wasn't out-of-pocket expense to you for all those insurance costs. You still have insurance premiums right here. Now, that's not to say the cost of health insurance hasn't increased. Of course it has. That's the beauty of insurance, though. We all pay a fee on a regular basis to pay much less if catastrophe strikes. We'll cover this a lot more in the last two chapters of the book. The next table shows that in 1959, Americans imported 2.6% of all goods being food and things of that nature. By 2019, that number grew to 16.5%, a 600% increase. So again, we're going to go back to the table, goods. Durable goods, motor vehicles and parts, furnishing and durable house equipment, recreational goods, non-durable goods, food and beverages, clothing, gasoline. All right, so goods. We imported only 2.9% or 6% of goods in 1959. By 2009, we imported a 600% increase. Again, food, and not just food, durable goods and non-durable goods, all right? It's a completely different story for services, though. From 1959 through 2019, Americans increased imports of services by only 8%. Check this out. So here's our imports of goods. 2.6% in 1959. By 2009, it's 16%. Durable goods went from 3.2 to 20. No. Hey, no, we're not doing that. From 3.2% to 21.4%. Other durable goods went from 4% to 28.8%. Clothing, we don't do textiles in the South anymore, went from 3.8% to 32%. Basically, a third of all of our clothes are imported by 2009. And I can only imagine it's more than that. So our total increase, right here, import shares of personal consumer expenditures by major product type went up by 13.9%. From 2.6 to 16.5 But in terms of real numbers, that's like a 600% increase. Right here, we imported 1.2% of our services in 1959. Now we import 1.3%, 0.1% increase. Services, healthcare, we don't import any services for healthcare. Transportation services, just a little bit. Recreation services, just a little bit. Financial services, hardly anything. Housing and utilities, we don't import. Isn't that crazy? So while imports of goods have exploded, our spending on them as a percentage of total expenditures have dropped. Yet even though our imports of services have basically stayed the same, our spending on them relative to total expenditures have increased. How can this be? It's pretty simple. Using cheap foreign labor has driven the price of goods down. Quote, for goods, price changes for categories in which imports of finished goods have been increasing share of consumer purchases over time have been particularly low. You hear that? For goods, price changes for categories in which imports of finished goods have been an increasing share of consumer purchases have been particularly low. The prices haven't changed much. They've been going down. The categories of clothing and footwear and recreational goods and vehicles that exemplify this phenomenon. It's not easy to import services, though. You have to pay people for an American wage for the services they provide. Your healthcare provider, your electrician, your financial guy. The cost of services are taking up more of our budgets. And that's a fact, dude. I mean, the numbers are the numbers. We've been importing goods, driving the prices down, even though the demand for those goods have gone up because we're using cheap foreign labor. Well, basically, we've been exporting our inflation. Now, I'm not sure that's going to continue, but it certainly happened over the last 60 years. That's a fact. Stay tuned for part 2 of this. Not part 2. The next chapter will be the decline right here. Huge price decreases. That'll be the next chapter. We'll get that next time. So stay tuned. Hang tight. You'll get a lot. Actually, this part 2 of the same chapter. Deflation is here. Huge price decreases is part 2 of the same chapter. So hang tight because there's going to be a lot of huge price decreases we'll talk about next time. Thanks now.